Show me what you got.
How's it going, guys and geeks? Welcome to the Geekritique Show. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
I'm Dakota.
And Incredibles 2 was fantastic.
You missed a pun there. It was incredible.
So we just want to get this started by saying that we're going to start off with non-spoilers, and then we're going to go into spoilers.
Yeah, so the first, 15 minutes of this is probably going to be non-spoilers. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, definitely check it out up until that point, and then come back after you've seen.
And we'll leave a little thingamabobber so you can see, where the spoilers start. Thingamabobber. 14
years after the first film, Incredibles 2 is finally here, and mind blown. They were able to recapture the magic of the first film so well. Every voice actor was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Every character move felt deliberate and a natural progression of their original characters, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like they recaptured that family atmosphere so well, and it was just so good to see those characters in the theater again. I remember seeing that when I was a kid. I have a very vivid memory of coming out of the theater and my grandfather having to call his brother to tell him over the phone that this was better than James Bond. And in my head as a kid, I was like, wow, this is better than James Bond? And you know what? To me, it holds up better than any James Bond movie.
Wow. You heard it here first. But Dakota heard it like 14 years ago.
Yeah, I did.
I thought it was really fun and really fantastic. Laughing a lot. The movie wasn't like trying too hard to be like this big like emotional message, even though it totally did convey, what it was trying to. And I really liked that. It wasn't like you had to have like this moment where like they're trying so hard to make you cry or anything like that. It was just really fun, really lighthearted, and, really got some great morals across at the same time.
Yeah, I think in the public consciousness in today's day and age, people are constantly worried about whether or not certain political bias or ideological leanings will permeate future like films in series or whatever. We saw a big backlash recently with Star Wars, and I was worried something like that would happen with Incredibles 2 because a big part of the marketing campaign for this film was that the dads have to stay home nowadays so that the wife can work. Not that I was worried about that in particular, but they handled it so well.
Mm-hmm.
That and it just felt so natural, and it worked so well with their particular family dynamics that I loved every second of it.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really even think about that aspect, honestly, when I was watching the film, which is a good thing. Like, it's good to get those ideas across. Like, it's okay for the wife to go to work if that's the situation, because she says it more of like it's a sacrifice. Like, she was like, you already did your sacrifice for a family, now I'll do mine. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, I want all the glory and fame and you stay home and watch the kids. It wasn't like that at all. The morals that I was talking about more, though, when I said that before, I wasn't even thinking of like feminism or anything like that. I was more thinking of like everybody in the family made some kind of sacrifice
mm-hmm.
for the betterment of the family, including Mr. Incredible, including Mrs. Incredible, and Violet. I don't really know what Dash did, actually, besides eat some vegetables.
Yeah, that was a sacrifice in and of itself. He had to wash his hands several times.
Those are his sacrifices for the family. But I'm just saying it was more of like everybody does their part, everybody has their role. But it doesn't mean like, it doesn't need to fit the stereotypical dad goes to work, mom stays home and watches the kids. It could be any, it could be any different way. Even Violet saying, I'm going to stay home and watch Jack Jack, not like even in a super feminist way. I think it's more about the message is about family.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The reason I even brought that up just now about like political leanings and stuff like that is because I did get comments when we did our trailer reactions to Incredibles 2 about how everything is about like female empowerment and like putting man's position down, and no, that's not what this is about at all. It's about everyone. It takes a village to raise a child,
mm-hmm.
and that's totally what this movie was about. At least that aspect of it, raising Jack Jack. That was
And everybody doing what they could to help it.
Right. And I'm so pleased with it. At the end of the first Incredibles, I kind of always had this mentality like, Jack's too OP. He has too many powers. I didn't care for the character at all because I never expected to actually see a sequel to Incredibles that could live up to what the first one was able to accomplish. But how fun they made Jack was just above and beyond like my expectations.
Yeah, the way that they do his powers is incredible, and the way that, Nom Nom Cookie, like the way everybody's like trying to help him out is like perfect.
And kind of like with raising a child for the first time, you're very confused. You don't know what will work. And, if you have multiple children, I'm sure you've experienced the fact that like each baby is different. You have to experiment differently. Mm-hmm. And with Jack, you definitely have to experiment differently because he works on several different levels.
Yeah.
But what did you think of the character development for everyone else? I know I said that I really enjoyed it, but what stood out to you?
And that's what I liked about it, the simplicity. It wasn't like they felt the need to give each character like this huge defining moment. But I think because this film is immediately after the first film, all the characters are very similar. And yeah, they develop, they do their part and do different things, but it happens very organically, where it's not an unrealistic expectation for a family. It's not like Dash all of a sudden like makes a decision like an adult would. Like he's still a kid, and that's what I loved about it. Right. It wasn't like trying too hard to be like everyone needs to have like this crazy moment where they realize who they are, because that's not how life works. Which is what was so great. Like all the characters stayed pretty much true to themselves, so as far as character development goes, I think it was perfect because it was natural.
We saw in the trailers the scene with Dash learning new math according to Mr. Incredible, and how like hard that was to help adjust to that type of math. But one thing that was really cool, and not to touch into any heavy spoilers, but the fact that Mr. Incredible did take his job at home very seriously, raising his kids and stuff, and like upholding family values, that was super awesome to see. And in an age where the family is being torn apart by every number of things. It could be cell phones, could be separation in marriage or whatever. It's so good to see a family that, upholds that classic American values that, you're used to watching in old films and stuff.
Yeah, and as you see in the commercials, and you see it, in the film too, it's a real struggle for Mr. Incredible raising the family, but it's not because he's inept in any way. I think he, like, at first underestimates how difficult of a job it's going to be, but when you really think about it, it's much easier to stop something bad that's going on than to make your children happy. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a really difficult job, and he's trying his best, which is super admirable and really cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much harder to make 3 people that you love more than anybody in the world happy than, for Mrs. Incredible to go and fight evil. In my opinion, I think that's a much harder job.
Before we get into spoilers, is there anything that you didn't particularly care for in this film?
I mean, I think it's a fantastic film. I think some of the side characters are kind of like, meh, but at the same time, they are side characters, and you don't really see them enough to even formulate an opinion. But the focus is definitely on the family, but that's like the only negative thing I can think of right now. What about you?
I would say that there was no warning for epileptic people, because there are several scenes in this that are like super like.
Has that been an issue for people?
Well, I don't know. The reason I even came up with like that notion is because my mom has had seizures because of that in the past. So that was the first thing I thought of. Like for people with like epileptic shock, like I'm wondering like how they're going to deal with certain scenes, because there's certain almost like strobe lighty scenes, but much quicker.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think of that. That could be problematic.
That would be my only like real concern for people going into this film, is that if you have any form of epilepsy, just be careful. Know when to close your eyes, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And another negative thing I can think of too is, I want to say predictability, but it's not predictable. It's not, but it's not shocking either. Like, this is no M. Night Shyamalan. Like, there's no
twist.
Crazy twist or anything. Like, it's pretty much what you see is what you get, but you're happy with it because it's still really fun.
Right. And that's something that we have to stress, is that this is such a fun movie. Mm-hmm. It is, it perfectly took me back to when I was a kid.
Yeah, they didn't let the pressure of 14 years try to make them turn this film into something that it's not. It's just fun, and it's family friendly, and it's great.
And I think it's so different from other sequels that Pixar has done, namely the Toy Story series, because the Toy Story series has always taken the approach of remaining children's movies, but growing up with the audience. Because between Toy Story 1, which I was the same age as Andy in that film, and Toy Story 3, where he was going to college, and that was the year I was graduating high school, that was the perfect, and I'm sure you experienced the very same thing, where that was like the perfect growth of characters, and the toys had aged in that particular fashion. With this, it's literally picking up right after. Mm-hmm. And they're able to recapture that same joy and imaginative world that they did in the very first film, and you never felt like you left. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't even have to watch the first Incredibles movie to pick up on where the story has left off, I don't think.
A little bit with supers being illegal and stuff.
That is true. Yeah.
You might want to know a bit about that.
Yeah, because they don't explain it they do explain it, but they don't explain why.
They did have a really interesting message on the media and their narrative, and how, they did have, deeper meanings, but it wasn't thrown in your face. Because it was kind of all about, showing a different narrative than what was currently being shown. And I think that's pretty important, actually. There were some, really more mature concepts, but it wasn't, super, some movies you go to see it and it's things and ideas are thrown in your face so much that it's nauseating. It's all right, even if I agree with them sometimes, it's annoying to me. So this was cool. And then when we went to the theater, what was awesome too was we went Friday at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it was all people our age. And all the commercials, all the trailers were kids trailers, and everybody's laughing and commenting, but it's all people our age, which was actually pretty awesome.
Yeah. In regards to what you're saying about being able to trust your media, and being able to differentiate truth from what's being fed to you. Mm-hmm. I think that may have been the catalyst that pushed this film forward when it was pushed forward, you know? Mm-hmm. Because the director, I've said this several times on the show previously, but Brad Bird has said, the story has to be right for him to make it.
Yeah.
And it was very subtle, putting that notion in the public's mind that what you're being fed on the news or your particular news outlets may be biased. Mm-hmm. You're only seeing one side of the picture. And in this age of what is truth, I think that's a really interesting message, and one that they didn't beat down into.
And that's the thing, because I'm not saying there were no morals, there were no interesting concepts. I think there were, and I think there's a lot more to this film than meets the eye. However, it's not pushed on you. So if you don't want to have to see it, you don't have to.
Right.
You can still just enjoy the film.
Yeah.
Or if you want to look into these deeper things, there are things that you could look into and dig into. And it's not like a certain opinion is being forced upon you.
Right. That's true. And that's something that I really appreciate in classic science fiction. They're always pushing their narrative, but so subtly that it makes you think. It doesn't make you think like the author, but it makes you think, this is how the world can turn out if we don't think about it this way, but maybe this way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really powerful way that science fiction writers and fantasy writers of the past have been able to do that I find is very difficult to enjoy in modern science fiction and fantasy, because that line between what the author believes and what the characters in the story believe has become so undefined. The voice of the characters in the story is generally what the author believes now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that across the board, but generally speaking, I find that is very annoying. So I guess that's where we'll leave off with the non-spoiler half of this review, just because we actually want to get into the discussion of the movie.
Yeah. Spoilers. Let's go.
Okay, my favorite scene of the entire movie is Jack versus the raccoon.
It's the best.
It is absolute madness and hilarity that Jack is facing off one-on-one with all of his superpowers against this super vindictive raccoon who is just antagonizing.
Somehow isn't a match for him.
Is a total match. Like, you know, there are certain points where like Jack just like throws open his like fire ability, and the raccoon's like freaking out as it's trapped in like the yard chairs. But as soon as he gets out, like he throws the ashes on Jack.
Yeah.
So that he could put him out. Like, it's so perfect. Like,
who knew, like, of all the people, like, adults don't know what to do with Jack because they don't want to hurt him, but this raccoon was just like, oh, it's on.
It's on. Like, you were a perfect match for me. Like,
he's like,
this is the
lasers.
fight I've been waiting for.
The scene you're talking about where he's tied up and Jack starts incinerating the lawn chairs as he's coming towards him is absolutely terrifying. But you know a scene's good when in the movie theater, everyone's lost all inhibitions with their laughter. Like, people are laughing in, like, the dorkiest ways. Like, we're all just, like, dying, cracking up, and it's perfect.
The fact that
it's so unexpected. It just happens out of nowhere.
The fact that I left the first movie 14 years ago thinking, wow, Jack is OP, not really sure if I like the character, blah, 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 he's a baby, to this movie where he's like my favorite character of the Parr family is so great. I'm so happy that they did this character so well. As even the scenes with like Edna Mode.
Yeah, oh my gosh, and then he's walking like her. And she didn't even care until he looked like her. And that says so much about how much she loves herself.
Right.
Because she's like, whatever, I'm not watching your baby. And then he imitates her nose and her hair. And she's like, actually, perfect. I love Edna.
Yeah, Edna's a great character in and of herself. Just the fact that she's like, she thinks so highly of herself and her designs. And
she was so like appalled that Mrs. Incredible was wearing the other designer's suit. She's like, Mrs. Incredible, and whatever his name is.
So
wait, but speaking of Jack, Dakota actually brought up a really good point that I hadn't noticed. But at one point when Jack turns really big, he actually looks a lot like in Spirited Away the baby. And that's not the first time that a Pixar film has referenced a Studio Ghibli film.
Yeah, actually Totoro has been featured. Totoro without the mini ears has been featured in Toy Story 3, I believe. You can tell that the Pixar directors are hugely influenced by Hayao Miyazaki's work.
Yeah.
In the medium.
So now that we're in spoilers, I want to talk about something that I kept kind of hinting at in the non-spoiler review, which is the concept of the media being kind of controlling or having a specific narrative. Because what's interesting is, in this, that the villain is actually the one that is trying to control the media and tell that narrative. And it's a female. So it's not like they have this big, like, feminist agenda because it's like women can be bad too and try to push their motives on the media as well. It's not like... I don't know, I thought that was kind of cool. I thought it was, interesting, and I thought that that's a pretty bold...
It subverts expectations on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just think it's such an interesting way to create a story. Mm-hmm. And the character in question wasn't heavily featured in the trailers, like the actual supervillain. I forget her name now that we're actually doing this review. But in the trailers, you totally expect it to be the guy that is hiring Elastigirl to headline this new line of superhero, I guess, TV show that he's doing. And you totally expect that it's him. And even in the movie, I'm like, man, he's the one who's just going to turn around and be the guy who is controlling all these people as a screenslaver. But no, it's actually his sister, the one that like seems super candid and like super cool and
really trendy.
But I will say, like, as soon as she walked out on screen, I was like, I don't remember seeing her in the trailers. That's suspicious.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what I meant when I said, like, it's not it's not like this movie's going to shock you, because when you find out that it is her, you're not, like, really shocked. You're more shocked when you find out he isn't in on it, and that he's just, like, really this innocent idealist who just wants to bring heroes back. Like, it's actually kind of sad that his sister's, like, doing all this stuff behind his back, and he's, like, trusting her with the company while he's out, like, just trying to make dreams come true.
He's kind of like an Elon Musk.
That's what I said, too. Yeah, I, like, leaned over, I was like, this guy's like Elon, like, what's the deal?
Well, the jury's still out on whether Elon Musk is actually a supervillain or not.
Yeah, we'll find out.
We'll find out in a couple of years if Tesla's become sentient or whatever.
One thing that I did think was interesting, too, she's just such an interesting villain, because her motives for being a villain are actually really practical. It's like, yeah, if our parents hadn't put all of their faith in heroes and just went to the safe room that they have, they would still be alive. Yeah, she's actually right. Like, if they had that argument, I think I'd agree with her. But then the way she goes about it is completely wrong. And what's interesting, too, is we had people, you know, complaining in our comment section, like, oh, you know, they're trying to bring out feminism because Mrs. Incredible is now the one, like, leading the family. This is so predictable. This is so ridiculous. It was actually the supervillain, that lady, who was saying, you're the one living in Mr. Incredible's shadow. The villain was the one pushing that agenda, not the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually, you know...
Like I said, it subverts expectation on that front from, like, all sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, which I thought was actually pretty, you know, interesting.
There were a number of characters that were introduced that had superpowers that I don't feel like they totally... they were so quirky and odd that I wasn't totally sold on them, just because, like, wow, you just found, like, as many misfits as possible. What are the chances that the Incredibles, this family of 5, are, like, normal-ish looking people compared to the rest of these, like, freaks who just show up with all these random powers? I thought that was kind of weird. At the same time, all the mainstream superheroes have been known to, like, have apparently died in the previous film. Yeah,
they've either been killed, or they're in hiding. Because the only way that, you know, Frozone was found was because he was leaving a crime scene. If it wasn't for that, they probably wouldn't have gotten in touch with the Incredibles and Frozone to begin with.
Yeah.
So that was kind of by chance. But these other people were probably not very private about their powers, because they weren't trying to be heroes, they just had abilities.
Right. I think Void was the coolest.
Yeah, Void was very cool.
She was really the only one that they developed appropriately.
I really like the fight scene with Void and Violet, actually.
It was clever.
They were, like, a really good match for each other. At first, when I first left the theater, I was like, I feel like Void was kind of underused. I feel like she could have been used a lot more, you know, dealing with that ship and everything. But then they did kind of show that her powers weren't really, like, refined enough to relocate a whole ship. She might have accidentally put it on top of all the people in the city.
Right. You know? Well, what Jen is, like, trying to... What the scene you're trying to talk about is when the ship was going super fast towards the city, and everyone was trying to figure out a way to divert it. But we literally have a person who has been developed in this movie who can literally create a portal which will literally divert the entire ship. But we don't know the extent of her abilities, how quickly she can manifest like a literal void that quick, or portal, if she's even capable of doing something like that. Because there was some struggle at the end where she was trying to save both Elastigirl and the villain. Man, I really wish we knew the character's name at this point. Void was struggling to be able to save both of them without hurting them.
She was able to do it, but she was, like, struggling, and then even
getting
Mrs. Incredible onto the jet was just, like, a nightmare. She's kept, like, throwing her over and then catching her and then throwing her up again. I'm surprised they didn't make Mrs. Incredible, like, puke from all that, because she was just being, like, flung around in circles. Like, imagine that. That sounds horrifying.
She's able to do so much, like, literal elasticity with her body that, like, you'd think that she'd be so used to all that kind of, like,
yeah, that's true. Movement. Yeah, probably, actually. Speaking of, like, wacky movement, I loved her on the motorcycle
that was
detached, cool, and then she was using it to, like, jump and stuff. That was, like, the coolest thing ever. Talk about an ab workout. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, using your whole core to, like, lift the top half of a motorcycle and fling yourself up. Spot on.
I've always liked the designs of Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl because they're exaggerated. As much as, like, comic books and stuff like to exaggerate the female form, they also like to exaggerate the male form. And I feel like in Incredibles it's even more so.
Yeah.
with her having like this teeny tiny waist and like the big hips and like the big chest, and then Mr. Incredible just being this huge hulking guy.
But Mr. Incredible has a little dad bod, which I love. He has a little pooch.
I love the fact that they're able to do all that, and make it feel real at the same time. Like, it totally works in their world, in that art style. I appreciate that.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was interesting was that they chose to add, like, bags underneath Violet's eyes that I don't remember being there as drastically. Prominent. Yeah, or as prominent in the first film. And I kind of like it on one hand, because it's like, you know, girls don't have to look like perfect, but at the same time with like Dash or any of the other characters, they didn't have that, so it was like, why just Violet? Because there were scenes where Violet just looked like haggard. Psychotic. Yeah, like her hair would be like all crazy, and I look crazy sometimes. Speaking of, like, I really shouldn't be talking with my hair today, but it just, to me, it was like, oh, like, why just Violet? Like, why not like any of the other characters? Like, you know, they kind of picked on her.
Oh, the scene with her and her at the diner with Tony, and like her just like spitting up all the water and just trying to keep cool, and
perfect teenage stuff, like,
and the look on her face of just pure shock and like trying to cover up what she had just done, spitting up all the water. I love that stuff. Those character moments are what make the movie for me. As cool as superheroes are, we have so many superhero movies. So the fact that Incredibles 2 is able to not only float amongst all those other superhero movies that have, arisen like post the first Incredibles movie, but you can connect with the characters on a human level. I think that is so important for any film.
Yeah. I did want to make a correction. Before, I said that the villain was the only one pushing her message or opinion onto the media, but that's actually not true, because Mrs. Incredible was doing the same thing. So both the good side and the bad side were doing it, which I think is actually even more interesting. But I think it's kind of saying, like, the media could be a good tool, or, you know, it depends on, like, who's doing it and how they're using it and what purpose they're using it for. Or maybe it's not that I'm correcting what I said before, it's an addition to what I was saying before. That's
your addition.
That's my addition.
So, end of the day, do you think this is a better film than Incredibles?
I don't know, that's hard. Better? I don't know. Isn't this like the only two films that have gotten, like, a series of films that have gotten an A+ cinema score?
Yeah, it's the only series that has received two films in it that received an A+ cinema score, which is a conglomeration of audience experience and basically their favorable enjoyment after leaving the film directly. And I think that's what I read anyway. It's the first series to have two films in it that both are A+.
A+. I like them both. What do you think? Which one's better?
Honestly, they're both fantastic films. They're both
incredible films.
Ooh. They both capture that same magic, but in totally different ways. And I think this, while being a direct sequel, is able to tell a superhero story intended to enlighten the people watching it today, as opposed to what the first film was.
Yeah, definitely.
And I really appreciate that. I think that's really fantastic.
And going back to, like, what I was saying before about everybody in the family making sacrifices, you know, Mrs. Incredible, it's not like she was just dying to do that because she wanted glory for herself. She viewed her going and taking that job as a sacrifice to help her family. You know, Mr. Incredible staying home, that was a sacrifice. And then even the kids, you saw them making sacrifices, like Violet saying, you know, it would be better for Jack if I stayed and put up, you know, a force field. Like, that's going to be the best protection for him. And I think that's ultimately, you know, the best part of what this film's about, is that, you know, everybody in the family has to do their part. You know, it's not about, you know, feminism. It's not about, you know, stereotypical roles in the family. I think everybody needs to do what they can to help out in fiction. And I love that, because it's very realistic. Like, sometimes, you know, you see, like, these families with, like, a bunch of kids, and you see the older kids definitely taking care of the younger ones, and, you know, stuff like that. You know, everybody does their part. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. We loved it. It's a great film. We can't wait to see it again. We're going to actually watch the first one again with some friends and family. And then we're probably all going to go see Incredibles 2 again. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. Hopefully we didn't spoil the movie. If you've gotten this far into the trailer or into the review, thank you guys so much for watching up to this point. And if you have, our secret comment of the day, if you choose to accept, is adolescence. Use that word in a comment, or just leave that in the comment section down below, so we know that you watched up to this point in our review,
and so that other people think that you're calling us immature.
Yes,
which we are.
If you see adolescence in any comments down below, please be sure to thumb them up, so that those float up to the top of the comment section. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate each and every one of you guys who are viewing our channel here. If you want to watch more videos right over here, you can. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because we're going to be making a bunch more videos very shortly, and very different videos, hopefully. That's my ultimate goal going forward. But thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a good one.